says I'm the support act for the drinks. You always try and have somebody worse than you after when you're in a festival situation. I can't compete with drinking. So I'm going to keep this relatively short. I've got a company called Illustrious, which creates three-dimensional soundscapes around the world. And we'll start off with where I started off, which was in 1978, before most of you were born. Yes, I know, I had a beard, all right, I know. They've all come back, haven't they, beards now? That's me and Phil doing You've Lost That Loving Feeling. And what's quite interesting about it is that we were trying to do something there, which is, you know, pretty much the lingua franca now, which is kind of an immersive kind of soundscape, stroke, projection environment with the early Humorly. But all we had was a couple of crappy Kodak carousel projectors at the time. But it looked all right, actually. And this is us now. Actually, I was performing with a 100-piece orchestra last year in Germany. And just to show that we're not just a bunch of old farts, that's us performing with LaRue at the Brit Awards last year. So, just to go back to Illustrious, in 2000, I realised that the music business was going in a very strange direction, which I didn't like, personally, and I was getting asked to produce more and more boy bands and kind of X Factor type things, because I've had a 30-year history of production, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go down that path, because if you have a hit with something you don't like, people come back and ask you to do more of it, and so it's an endless negative feedback loop, no matter what they pay you. So I thought, in the year 2000, I was talking to Vince Clarke one day, as you do, and decided to get back to what excited me about being in a band in the first place, which was the creativity in its purest form. So we formed a company called Illustrious, which was using this new software that would help design, which was to create three-dimensional soundscapes in rooms sometimes as big as this, sometimes much bigger outdoors, and sometimes in quite small environments. So we basically, with three-dimensional sound, we place speakers at different levels in the room, and it's like surround sound you get in a theatre or a cinema, except it's got a height axis as well. And that's Vince there, who looks like he's about to kill you. He's actually quite sweet, really. And it's just to show that, you know, not to show off how many records we sold, because we were lucky to grow up in the 80s, where people actually bought records. But just to show that we've had a long period of experience in terms of content. So this, we regarded the spatialization of sound as being a new frontier, just to prove that we know what we're talking about from a content point of view. And for the last 12 years, we've created three-dimensional living sound environments which articulate ideas to an audience in an emotionally engaging and memorable way. And it's memorable because it's emotionally engaging. And it's often in collaboration with other sensory and visual technologies. So we're very collaborative. We're not saying that sound replaces everything else. We're also saying that sound shouldn't be in the service of a picture. That's pretty much the story of the 20th century, is the primacy of film and TV over sound. And I don't know about you lot, but I listen to radio more than I watch TV. And I listen to music a lot more than I listen to radio. So I think sound is often underestimated in its visceral effect on us. We all like going to concerts, we all like going to see, you know, epic movies, but they would be nothing without the sound element, as we all know. So what do? We do large-scale live events with 3D sound. Done several things for the Royal Ballet, written pieces. I'm glad to say I'm in the annals of the Royal Ballet's archives, together with Stravinsky and Rita Spring and all that stuff. So I'm very proud of all that. We do a lot of work with architects as well, to try and modify sound environments and beautify sound environments when they built their buildings out of glass and steel. I'm not saying anything about this building, it's fine. actually. It isn't, it sounds okay, but it's not too echoey. We do a lot of sound art, we do a lot of installations in museums and fine art collaborations, because I believe that content is king. So you find the best people to work with, you aspire to make the best piece of work you can. And that's how you make great work, if you're working collaboratively, I think. We do a lot of TV and film stuff, which pays the bills. We do quite a lot of research, actually, as well. Very interested in synesthesia, funnily enough. We did a symposium about synesthesia with my Future of Sound organisation a couple of years ago at Goldsmiths. And that was very interesting because I'm currently working on the synesthetic combination between sound and smell, currently, with the smell artist Cecil Tolas. She's sending me single molecule scents, single molecules, pure, and I am creating a sound based on that smell, that individual molecule. And she sent me 10 already, so I've got individual little sounds. And then I send back my ideas to her, then she sends me some more. And the idea is to build up a kind of de facto library of synesthetic combination between smell and sound. And in the end, she'll make a perfume out of whatever composition I make from these sounds, which I think is quite nice. And we do the Future of Sound events and the grand sounding transmedia experiences. Not quite sure what it means, but it's as good as anything else. And we've done over 60 three-dimensional immersive sound projects at various scales since the year 2000. And we use a piece of software called 3D Audio Scape, which we helped design. And here's a crappy screen grab, but if you imagine we had a 3D sound system installed in this room, we'd have some speakers in a ring in the roof and some speakers at ground level, and the grid would symbolise halfway up the space, and these coloured balls symbolise different sounds flying around the room. They don't have to go in circles, they could go in any direction you want, and I use a joystick with a height control. But nowadays you could use an iPad running something like Lima or anything where you can put in 3 axes of control simultaneously. We'll do the trick. And I'm just going to describe to you quickly the kind of basic ways that we use immersive soundscaping. Number 1, art. Cityscaping is something we're very interested in. What does a city sound like? Can you distill the essence of a city and then make an exhibition out of it, for instance? The largest one that we've done so far was in the centre of Mexico City, where we had I think it was a 38.10 system installed in this entire square, on flagpoles, on balconies, you name it, all around the square. And we had 12 2-hour pieces designed by different sound artists, inspired by the sounds of Mexico City, ranging from giant invisible motorbikes driving through the centre of the square to invisible helicopters keeping an eye on invisible riots going on in Mexico City, and then micro-edited mariachi bands flying around the square at 4 in the morning. All sorts of weird stuff, some very famous sound artists. It was a big success, played to 1 million people in 10 days. We couldn't get the people home on the opening night because they were all fueled on tequila and cocaine, which I think we could do with some of you. Maybe we'd get on the expenses. So that's very exciting. And to give you a further example of how we work with other disciplines, there's a company called Cratosphere, an artist called Cratosphere, Laurent Loulier, who, this is a park in Geneva, actually, and he had this tree. They wanted him to do an installation using light for this tree, and he noticed that if you turned the tree upside down, or the diagram of the tree upside down, it looked like lungs, which is a metaphor for the lungs of the city, of course. So he thought, well, we'll make it pulse, so it's like breathing. However, he realised there was something missing, so he asked me to do a 3-dimensional sound experience with it. So If you imagine the trees over here, and this is the park, then I had recorded my own self breathing actually, and slowed it right down so it sounded like a giant, and had the tree exhaling into the space and then back into the tree, which engaged people very much, and children liked it, and so everybody liked it actually. It's pretty good. We were asked to do the British Pavilion at the Venice Architectural Biennale in 2006. And we did, basically, what we did was embody what it means, what a city the size of Sheffield means, that's where I come from, in artistic terms. So it's part sound, part visual, part projection, part interaction. We had 3 times three-dimensional soundscapes in different rooms. And it was a big success. It was an argument against traditional architectural thought that it's all about how you design a building visually. The philosophical argument we were using was that buildings should be about people and how people feel in that environment, not the latest glass spigots, steel grids, etc. And we did something similar to Mexico City in Leicester Square, actually. That played to 2 million people, where we distilled the essence of city life in London. 6 months engaging community groups. I'll just go back to that for a second. Engaging community groups to create their own recordings of what was particularly indicative about London. And then we did some kind of musical mashup stuff in 3 dimensions, flew it around in an hour-long composition, which played for 12 hours a day, basically. And it was very successful. We had one man who complained, who was from the Leicester Square Community Association. I actually said to him, are there actually any people living in Leicester Square? I don't think there are. At which point he walked away, which is quite interesting. We worked with Martyn Clarke. He's got an obsession with 80s music, thank God. And he did an amazing show last year in the Turbine Hall at the Tate, and we were very lucky to be asked to create 3-dimensional sound sculptures with him for that, which combines with the kind of 3-dimensionality of choreography as well, which I think is quite an interesting future developmental path that we'd like to get more involved with. And on a more kind of funky level, I suppose you'd say, we did a 3D DJ sound clash with, which was kind of like a sonic battle between Warp Records and Ninja Tunes in the Undercroft at the Royal Albert Hall, where they were throwing giant sound objects at each other using joysticks, etc. Again, this was quite big and quite exciting. And we've been trying to, we're kind of interested in different ways of using sound and constantly trying to find new ways. So we've been trying to persuade the National Portrait Gallery for about 18 months now that sonic portraiture is just as valid a means of expressing the essence of a human being as opposed to photography or painting in today's world. And they're getting it. They're actually getting it. So we actually did an event called Reanimate, where we installed 4 different 3-dimensional soundscapes throughout the galleries, and we asked various sound artists to create their impressions of certain paintings on the wall. But and it was a big success. A lot of people turned up who'd never been to the gallery before, which is great. But our ultimate aim is to persuade them to do a sensory gallery for people who are blind or deaf, so they can use any sense they want to get, if you like, inside what it means to be another human being, or inside the kind of biographical details of somebody's life. And I'm hoping that they're going to actually work with us towards this in the next 18 months. I think it's a very exciting and interesting way forward, because it will embody photography, film, impressionistic lighting, 3D sound, of course, and smell, going back to Cecil Talas. We've also been involved for God knows how many years now with the University of Virginia were trying to raise money to populate this rebuilding of ancient Rome, which you can actually wander around yourself. You can actually download this onto Google Earth as a free layer, and you can wander around ancient Rome as it used to look in AD 40 or 400. I get mixed up. I think it's AD 40. And it's quite astonishing, and the idea is we want to build a sonic platform so that it actually transports you in sound, binaurally, on headphones, into how that place would actually sound in that period. And on the other side, I've always been fascinated with looking at things not just from a purely digital point of view, but the other side of the coin is we have been in discussions for an awful long time now, because it takes forever in Italy, with the city of Rome, about the idea of creating a sound experience in the Colosseum, maybe a couple of hundred speakers, recreating the sound of the Colosseum full of 50,000 people enjoying the gladiatorial fights, or the animals fighting, or the mock sea battles with water organs and people chanting to their favourite gladiators. And, I mean, if you can imagine being in the middle of that experience in somewhere as evocative as the Colosseum, I think you agree that would be quite an astonishing thing. It's like a kind of 21st century version of Sony Lumiere without the Lumiere bit. And I think people would pay for that as a separate experience at the end of the day, particularly if it was going dark. You know, I think it'd be really quite an interesting thing. So we're getting there. It's going to take a little while to get it persuaded. We're involved in the BT Art Box project as well. I know it looks like a TARDIS nursery, but it's in fact, everybody is decorating or enhancing these models of the old phone boxes, and they're going to be dotted around London during the Olympics. And we're doing the sound version, which is going to feature it's going to look like one of these boxes, and there's nothing being done to it, but it's actually got some hidden sensors in it. So as you approach it, it's going to sound like somebody's trying to get out of the box inside. So, and it's going to trigger things like, at first it'll be quite calm, like, hello? You know, hello? Can you hear me? A bit like the ventriloquist dummy thing in the suitcase. And then it gets slowly more frantic if you keep triggering it. We're actually trying to find a device that will knock on the inside of the box, so people will try and open the box and try and let you out, but there's actually no entrance into it anyway. And then there's going to be a very loud heartbeat starts, and the heartbeat's going to get faster and faster, and you're going to get more and more panicky, and you're going to go. The idea is to put it down a side street, so it's not in a big public place where everybody's going, oh, isn't it funny? You know, it's actually going to be in a kind of creepy back street somewhere. So you're going past it and you're going, oh, you know, it's like Candy Camera or something. Anyway, I think that's quite fun. So it's the only sound one, as far as I know, that's going to be part of that project. There are some business applications. I know we don't really want to talk about it because you're thinking about drinking already, I know, but I'm going to force you. I did this touring show, which is about the combination of sound and light. And the next iteration of that will be feature of the senses, where we incorporate haptic interfaces, touch interfaces, taste, and food and stuff like that as well, and smell. And how all the senses combine to make us engaged with the world around us. I'll skip that. Bear with me. Oh yeah, going back to future of the senses, we're hoping to do, we've been in negotiations with BFI for about 2 years now, but it's definitely going to happen next year. We're going to do a 24-hour total immersion experience in the BFI IMAX at Waterloo. So I know it's going to be a bit tough. It might feel a bit like this afternoon for you guys, but you've got, the idea is, if you want, you can stay there for 24 hours and become immersed in a completely altered experience. And I think we're going to have the mechanism where you can sell portions of your ticket to other people, because it's only got 400 seats anyway. But there's going to be some very famous people performing, and one of them, I hope, is Well, this is my friend Andy Watson, who does the lighting show for Radiohead. And they've got this most amazing show which takes the frequencies that are played on stage and translates them into kind of like a three-dimensional forest of, I wish I've got a video, but I don't, I've only got a photo, of waveforms that wherever you view this amazing thing from, it changes depending on your point of view. It's beautiful. And they're going to take part in that event. We do quite a lot of 5 Sense branding experiences as well, so it's not all just airy-fairy stuff. There are companies and events companies that will pay for people like myself to create a more convincing, visceral experience in sound to convince people like journalists that they should be writing about this particular perfume in this case. I've got a sound branding company called SonicID which deals with all this stuff too. So I'm in quite an interesting space, and it's halfway between, it's right in the middle, the cusp between musician kind of artistic intention, but with a kind of in the service of commercial stuff. For instance, we designed some retail spaces for a diamond company called Hearts on Fire. Very futuristic, kind of Japanese, all-white, little screens in the wall, and we designed a three-dimensional soundscape, which was the sound of diamonds. And my thought of what the sound of diamonds was basically kind of tinkling and kind of futuristic and ambient, with the odd sound of heavy breathing in the background, to imply that if you buy this diamond, then you're gonna do all right, you know. This is the dark side, I know, but hey, got you laughing anyway. I'm going to play a little film now. I don't know if Nicole Yersham's here, is she? No. She had to go. Yeah, I knew I was turning this one. But we designed with Ogilvy, who are kind of co-sponsored this event, this amazing app for phones, which is ringtones that are inaudible to anybody except unless you're under 14 years old. So I'll just play this little film. Just play this little film. Okay.
Fundamentally, teens should have the right to play. This idea was inspired by the controversial ultrasonic alarms used to disperse teenage groups. These play high-pitched sounds which only young people can hear. When you get older, you can't hear these sounds anymore, as your hearing naturally gets worse.
Morning first, our main story for you this morning. The sonic device known as the mosquito, used to stop teenagers gathering near public places, should be banned. That's according to England's Children's Commissioner.
The mosquito, as it's called, emits a high-pitched noise which manufacturers claim can only be heard by those under 25. Critics say it's an ineffective way of tackling antisocial behaviour and that it demonises young people.
We turned this technology on its head. The mobile application we invented, the Fanta Stealth sound system, enables the same teenagers to communicate between themselves using these high-pitched frequencies which adults cannot hear.
It's a scientific fact that as you get older, your hearing gets worse. You can't hear high-pitched frequencies anymore. This is a teenager. His hearing is perfect. He can hear the high-pitched frequencies in the Fanta Stealth sound system, which means he can communicate with friends in secret. And I can't hear a thing.
The application has already generated considerable media interest. Directions to the website is on over 50 million packs in Great Britain. The viral film has been seeded to over 4 million teenagers across Europe.
So what is the Stealth sound system? The Stealth sound system uses sound waves that most adults can't hear. Most adult ears are damaged due to overexposure to loud things such as domestic rows and popular music. To make it work, go to the WAP site and download it straight to your mobile phone. Then adjust the volume on your phone. Keep doing this until you can hear it, but older people can't. By using the uncool sound, you can say something is uncool. Or use the cool sound if you think something is cool. The warning sound should only be used in serious circumstances. Like if a huge flaming meteorite is seconds from the Earth. And finally, there's the wolf whistle sound. The wolf whistle is an ancient and very effective form of communication which has been around since the 1970s. Use it to tell your best mate you fancy his mother.
So, there is one funny story associated with this, which is when we were developing these sounds, we were listening to them in the audible spectrum, or else, of course, we couldn't hear them because we're too old. So, and then right at the last minute, they approved the sounds, and then right at the last minute, we had to put them into the proper spectrum, which only teenagers could hear. And then amazingly, we sent it to them, and they rang us up and in a panicky way said, "We can't hear anything." I said, "That's the bloody point! So you go and find yourself a 12-year-old. But this is, marketing people for you. That's why I can tell that story because Nicole's with it. We do stuff in museums also. We do recreating historical ambiences is quite an interesting one because you have to research them in a thoroughly kind of non-Hollywood way. I mean, you try to make it as detailed as possible, and then we were actually employed in this instance to recreate the sound of a women's hospital in the 1920s with all the appropriate sounds, which is quite something. And we did the world's first, with my band in 17, we did the world's first 3D soundscape gig last October in the Roundhouse, which could have been designed for 3D sound, by the way, it's perfect. And we do have some interesting educational elements as well. For the last 8 years now, we've been developing a brand new, thank you, a brand new sensory studio at Three-Way School in Bath, a special needs school, which is combining all the different elements that we've learned over the years with projection, collaboration, three-dimensional sound, responsive lighting, and immersive projections to create, well, this is in the early stages, but this is much more like it now, create realistic environments for disabled children to actually control their environments using things like iPad interfaces. And in fact, the latest thing that we're working on is RFID tags, that each child has their own unique identity on a tag, so the room automatically changes into its own personal preferences when the child is on a one-on-one session and comes into the room. So it's like it's families. Photos, for instance, could come up on the wall as the favourite colour, changed into maybe its favourite place that it's been to, its favourite sounds. And I think this has got a lot of implications for the future of education generally, not just for autistic and cerebral palsy children. And we often get asked by architects to come in at the last minute and try and rescue a building which looks fantastic on their AutoCAD but sounds and feels terrible. This was one example in the Royal Victoria Infirmary Hospital. They brought coffee shops in, they've got, hairdressers into this public area. It's more like an airport, really. And it looks lovely, but it felt terrible. It had no vibe at all, and nobody wanted to hang out there at all. And so they got us in to advise on how we could alter the environment. And the most exciting development recently is, in the future, cities will become busy and noisy. Shouldn't we consider positively modifying our urban environments from a sensory perspective? I think this is the future. So I was just telling this story earlier to someone else. Last year we were asked by, believe it or not, the Noise Abatement Society to create a three-dimensional soundscape at the bottom of West Street in Brighton. Now, I don't know if anybody's been down there. It is chaos on a Friday and Saturday night. It's full of hen parties, stag parties, people drunk off their nuts on every form of drug imaginable, lots of police, lots of dogs, lots of problems, glasses being thrown, people bored waiting to get into the nightclubs. There's the capacity of all the nightclubs in that area is about 10,000. So you can imagine there's 2,000 or 3,000 people. It's like a powder keg, essentially. So we installed a three-dimensional surround sound system and tried different techniques to try and calm the crowd. I don't mean sonic cannons or anything. I mean, you know, different types of composition. For instance, we did some ambient things, we did some seascapes, we did some naturalistic settings, we did some electronic ambient music. We also did, one thing was very interesting, we took Beyonce's Countdown and slowed it down by 50%, kept it in the same key, and see if anybody would actually recognise it, let alone anything else. And they absolutely got it. They thought it was hilarious. We also did a thing with the original track that I wrote in 78 called Being Boiled. Did a new version of that and slowed it down imperceptibly through a 5-minute period, thereby hopefully slowing down people's heart rates, etc. And this worked also. So and also it was a crazy night anyway, because everybody was in fancy dress. It was Halloween. So there should have been more trouble. In fact, at midnight, which is normally the worst time, the police deployed their officers elsewhere in the city because there was no trouble at all. So from a situation, a control group, if you like, of having maybe 10 to 20 arrests every Friday and Saturday night, they had no arrests whatsoever on this particular night. And so we are now working, presenting this to different cities around Europe, and hopefully we're going to get some more work in this direction, because I think it's a way of you know, positively soundscaping for the future in our increasingly crowded urban environments. That's something we're doing in Regent's Park, with the sounds of children playing in the park. That's something quite simple. But this is the big one we're doing this summer. For the duration of both Olympics, we're creating a three-dimensional soundscape which covers the entire length of the bridge, which is going to be partially generated by the footfall on the bridge. It's going to have a camera looking down the bridge. As people move across the bridge, it will actually trigger sounds, and it will proliferate those sounds across the bridge. So we're expecting probably 10 million people to actually witness this, and I think that would be quite something over a 7 or 8 week period this summer. And we're also doing a soundscape at the underpass leading up to Wembley Park, to Wembley Stadium, a Wembley Park tube station. A famous piece of commentary from the successful gold medals of Britain in the past. And finally, I've been working recently for a company called Jambox. I don't know, you may have seen these little Bluetooth speakers. I've been working with them to create three-dimensional soundscapes that you can actually carry around with you. If you hold it at arm's length, the sounds appear to be coming from all around you and behind you. And there are several bands who are looking to set up spatial mix labels, and we're probably going to help them consolidate them all into one big label. We've just done the new De La Soul album and Soul Clap, and this could be a big thing coming up shortly. We're doing some research on this thing called Allosphere, also in the University of Santa Barbara, which is a three-dimensional sound sphere, which is, if you imagine, it's about the size of this room actually, it's bloody enormous. So if you imagine a walkway going across on the first floor up there, you could actually sit and speakers would surround you everywhere, together with high-definition projection and lights. And I'm working with Empire of the Sun, doing some experience pods that they're going to send around the world. And this is a new idea for bands generally, to try and engage with their fans in some kind of physical way rather than just digital. So we're going to help them create three-dimensional soundscapes and generative works as well, and photography, etc. So I'm not going to go through the boring stuff because nobody wants a drink now, and frankly I do as well. And but it's a very interesting field that we're lucky enough to be working in now. It's a burgeoning field. If anybody's interested in immersive soundscaping, you can talk to me afterwards. I'll be around for about half an hour afterwards. Thank you very much.